Hey guys, what's up? I thought I would do a story today for old time's sake. I haven't been doing a lot of stories because I am getting ready to start the YouTube channel, and so I don't want to spend a ton of time sitting down and doing these long, well-researched stories when I want to save them for YouTube, which is going to be coming very soon. But I thought it was appropriate. We got to talk intermittent fasting. I had so many questions yesterday. You know, I sometimes know when certain posts are going to be controversial, and I didn't think yesterday's post was going to be controversial, but people are really, really emotional and attach their feelings regarding their morning eating routine. So, you know, mind blown there. But before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that if you throw me a cite your sources or research ? I'm going to immediately block you. Because when you study physiology and you're looking at nutrition in the context of biology and physiology, you take nutrition science in context of the human body. And, you know, it's like one of those things where, well, this nutrition study says to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, that nutrition study says to jump off a cliff. Have fun with that. You know what I mean? It's just this like very like science is God culture, and science is used right now to really manipulate the masses, obviously. So just kind of keep that in mind. You know, research studies have their place, as do nutritional epidemiological studies, but that doesn't mean that they're everything. And we always want to look at research in context of biology and physiology, because if, you know, a study says intermittent fasting helps with inflammation, that's great, but what is it doing to your thyroid, your adrenals, your long-term health, your hair, you know, like what is it doing to all these other things that we care about? That's not what the study is researching. They're just checking to see if it helps with inflammation. So it's just really important to kind of keep that in mind. And I don't really like this, like, show me the research study. Like, that's just like a negative Nancy situation, and I just really don't appreciate it here on my page. If you want some resources for me to point you to so you can do your own research, I'm fine with that. I will help you out. With that being said, we're going to talk about fasting. So, you know, fasting is very popular right now. It's touted to reduce inflammation, help with gut issues. You know, all your friends are doing it. IF is the, you know, the hot new thing. And it's a marketing ploy for sure. I mean, we used to call it starving yourself or skipping breakfast, and now it's called intermittent fasting. And, you know, there's a lot of people in like the keto community, people that struggle with autoimmunity, who tout fasting as like this cure-all. But if you notice, they started one way, right? Usually like paleo, and then they've had to get more and more restricted to the point where they're no longer eating carbs, and they're now like skipping meals because their health is obviously not getting better. And oftentimes it's getting worse. And as a little tangent, you know, I used to follow a lot of these like paleo pages, low carb, keto pages, and I would always notice that these practitioners would always have to be like healing themselves of new things. Like now they have mold illness, and now they have this, and now they have this, and now they have this. And I'm like, their bodies are so not resilient to the stressors in their life. There's something wrong. And so I just want you to kind of keep that perspective as we go through this, because I know that it can help with symptoms, but does helping with symptoms really mean that it's doing good, or does it mean that it's symptom suppressing? There's a difference between suppressing a symptom and fixing the root cause of a symptom, which often many things in the health and wellness community are not doing that. We want to fix something and then make our bodies stronger and stronger and more resilient over time. That's kind of the goal. So, you know, as someone who has struggled with autoimmunity in the past, you know, I was diagnosed with celiac disease and Hashimoto's and lupus. I had all these type of autoimmune symptoms, and they couldn't really figure out what was wrong, but it all stems back to my digestive health. Like my gut was so effed up, so messed up. And it would come out in, you know, achy joints, skin lesions, extreme exhaustion, hair loss, inflammatory like dermatitis all over my skin, psoriasis on my scalp. Like I would just have all these autoimmunity type issues and inflammation issues. And so when I dove into like keto and intermittent fasting, I totally saw benefit for sure, because finally like my gut was given a break and I was not having to digest food all the time. And it felt really good at first. I felt like my stomach was flat for the first time. I felt less puffy. I was able to lose a little bit of weight, like, you know, a good like 7 pounds of fat. I felt leaner, and I had a lot of mental clarity. Like I was really energized. I was working out every day. I was strength training. Like I was feeling like, wow, I'm so productive. This is amazing. I'm feeling great. But what I've come to learn with myself and working with so many clients is just because something feels good doesn't mean it is good. And oftentimes it comes with a payment. You're building up debt right now, and you're gonna have to pay it later for sure. You're gonna hit that wall, boom, come crashing down, and all your nightmares are gonna come to life. You're gonna realize that, oh my gosh, I'm worse off than I ever was before. The reason this is usually the case with intermittent fasting is because we don't run on thin air. Let's pretty much summarize what this whole story is going to be about. Is women's bodies do not run on thin air. And so we have to run on fuel. Every single one of the cells in our body, including our liver cells, our gut cells, our skin cells, all run on a specific sugar called glucose. And if they do not have glucose being provided to them via the digestive tract through our food, our body actually has a backup system to make glucose. And the way that it does this is it breaks down our own tissues. Usually starts with muscle tissue because that's the easiest to break down. It's the easiest to turn into glucose with stored glycogen. And then it starts with our tissues, like our ligaments, that fat, that layer of fat in between our muscles and our skin, that gives us that like plump and youthful look. It breaks down certain tissues like our liver, our organs. The thymus gland specifically is something that goes pretty quickly. And it sends all these tissues to the liver in a process called gluconeogenesis, and turns those tissues or those amino acids into sugar, blood sugar, so the cells can uptake that fuel and continue on during a famine. But as you can imagine, this is not an easy process. It's quite inflammatory and it's quite damaging. We don't want to be breaking down our tissues unless necessary. And our body is not going to be providing or doing all the tasks that it should be doing. It's going to be only doing the essentials like living and surviving. And this can lead to all types of issues. So keeping this in mind while we intermittent fast and understanding that cortisol and adrenaline are the primary stress hormones that need to be elevated in order to break tissues down. One of their main jobs is to break those tissues down for the liver to then turn them into sugar. Understanding that we have to keep stress hormones elevated every time we need fuel should really make us nervous, because yeah, we might lose a little bit of fat. Usually it's around 5 to 7 pounds, but we're also losing tons and tons of minerals. We're peeing them out, which is why we feel so lean, not as puffy, is because it's actually adrenaline is a diuretic. And then, we also have to, maybe lose a little bit of fat at the expense of losing the youthfulness of our skin, the elastin, the collagen, our ligaments take a hit, any type of sphincters. So like the esophageal sphincters, we have something called the ileocecal valve that is a one-way valve in between the small intestine and the large intestine. Like I said, our thymus gland and our liver really take a hit because they're the ones that can tend to be broken down into sugar quickly. And so these are all being paid at the expense of us not eating. Thinking that we're doing something because our ancestors did it is not a good enough reason to do something. And to think that our ancestors would have not eaten on purpose is just absolutely ludicrous. Also, mental clarity, tons of energy, a little bit of weight loss, better gut health. If we are only achieving these things through not eating, we need to acknowledge that we have a problem. If eating is expressing these issues like weight gain or gut issues, then we need to fix the internal imbalance and not just starve our body of the essential fuel it needs, because we don't live like our ancestors do. We live in a modern environment that is very, very stressful, places so many stress demands on our body, including toxins in our air, our food, our water. We're not living, a native life anymore. We're not walking around. We're not moving properly. We're sitting all day. We're very sedentary. We're being exposed to fluorescent lighting and LED lighting. We're being exposed to EMFs and all types of, dirty electricity. Even when we're walking on the earth anymore, it's not charged the same way as it used to be. And so it's very important to understand that we, our exposure to all these chemicals in our environment and all this chemical disruption is affecting us on a cellular level. And to actually force our body to handle the stress environment with no fuel and having to make its own fuel actually increases stress, doesn't decrease stress or help with longevity at all. But to answer your guys' questions on why do I feel so much better intermittent fasting, in my opinion, people experience positive results short term. I'm going to emphasize short term with the intermittent fasting for two main reasons. Number one is their guts are beyond messed up. And number two, they are confusing adrenaline with feeling better. They're confusing adrenaline with health improvements. So starting with point number one, our guts are messed up. Not because we take rounds and rounds of antibiotics, which does mess up our guts. Not because we eat tons and tons of pesticides, which does mess up our gut. Not because our water's super messed up and our air is messed up, which does mess with our guts. But because we also live in a society and an environment that has increasingly made everything antibacterial. They've pasteurized everything. We've cooked everything. Our goal is to eliminate as much bacteria as possible and manipulate our food as much as possible to a very non-native form. We've gotten so used to eating so many non-foods that we don't even know that what we're eating is not what our body recognizes as food. And so because we're not being exposed to a variety of bacteria in both our food and our environment, eating a mixture of both raw and cooked foods, eating a mix or making sure we're, walking barefoot out in the dirt and making sure we're, playing in the soil and we're getting even like high quality soil on our food into our diet. We're not washing our hands all the time and trying to sterilize everything. The age of sterilization, this really wreaks havoc on our biome. We have a microbiome, which is this wonderful ecosystem of bacteria and viruses and pathogens and all types of bugs that exist in us and on us, in our uterus, in our vagina. We're really these bacterial creatures that coexist with bacteria, and bacteria do us a lot of good, and we work together with them. And what has happened is we've become increasingly obsessed with eliminating them to our own demise. And obviously our guts are paying the price. Because what we have done is not eliminate all bacteria. No, we've only eliminated beneficial microbes that offer us something in return for benefiting from living in us or on us. And so this increasing need to cleanse and sterilize and do detoxes and things like that has really wreaked havoc and allowed opportunistic bacteria to grow. And you know what else allows opportunistic bacteria to grow? Is stress. Stress paves the way for digestive breakdown. And so, all these stressors that we're exposed to on a daily basis, including not eating enough, wreaks havoc on our hydrochloric acid, which is our stomach acid, which should be as acidic as battery acid at all times. Any pathogens that we get exposed to in our diet should die and feed the microbes that already exist in our colon. But no, our stomach acid is diluted from our stress, from mineral deficiencies, from all types of poor food choices and more, and now it's like the acidity of apple cider vinegar. It once should have been able to burn right through your hand, and now it's not enough to really bother anyone. And so pathogens are making it through, and then we're also not digesting a lot of the protein in our diet or the foods or the minerals or the nutrients in our diet properly, and so our body is hurting for amino acids, our body is hurting for these nutrients that aren't getting broken down. And so this undigested food is making its way from the small intestine to the large intestine, from the stomach to the small intestine, and then we have impaired bile flow. So if you're not healthy, if you don't have the right minerals, if you're not hydrated properly, your bile that your liver makes and then puts into the gallbladder, and then the gallbladder will secrete that bile when in the presence of that digested food dropping into the duodenum, and that bile is now becoming sludgy and sluggish from all these toxic chemicals and estrogen dominance and thyroid issues.